In the year 10,191, there was a planet called Arrakis. This planet in front of you is currently Arrakis. It's a very distant planet, and you won't find anything but lots of sand everywhere. Just sand. And this sand is not normal sand. It's so strong it can penetrate iron. Above it are storms and hurricanes, and it's full of storms and hurricanes. The people who live on Arrakis are tribes who call themselves the Fremen. But these tribes are almost the only ones still alive on this planet, because they have, of course, adapted and made themselves shields capable of withstanding the severe winds they face. But the thing is, this planet isn't as bad as you think. Actually, it is a certain substance called spices, but there are an extraordinary amount of those spices on this planet. Almost nowhere else but Arrakis. These spices enhance human life immensely. They also make intergalactic travel really easy, like fuel, but very powerful. Without them, traveling across galaxies and stars would be impossible. That's why everyone always wants to plunder this planet unnaturally. But of course the Fremen, who are the native people, are strong and never let anyone steal the spices from their planet. Anyone who tried to rob them got into war with them. However, because of their small numbers, sometimes other planets would come and steal the spices forcibly, and the Fremen couldn't stop them. But then one day, a group called the Harkonnen showed up to take the largest amount of spices from Arrakis. And they did it. They kept plundering, and no one could stop them. The people of the planet Arrakis tried many times to defend the place, but the Harkonnen were stronger, and the spice made them even stronger. But one day, the Harkonnen took over the planet completely by decree and contract from the Emperor. By the way, the Emperor is the ruler of all the planets in the known universe. Remember this story well and stay with me for what's coming next. Saga was born and lived on a planet called Caladan. It's important that Paul is the son of Duke Leto Atreides I. Simply put, a duke is like the ruler of the entire planet. It's also important that Paul's mother is Lady Jessica, who's highly respected because she's the concubine of the emperor and the mother of the heir. But in general, she's very powerful because you could call her a witch. Paul always dreamed of a girl living on the planet Arrakis, even though he had never seen her or been to Arrakis. This constant anxiety was caused by the strangeness of it. Not long after, an envoy from the emperor arrived, assigning Paul's father to govern the planet Arrakis. Paul's father, of course, had no choice but to comply, as nobody can refuse the emperor's request. After a while, Paul met Duncan. Duncan introduced him to Leto's assistant, who was also the commander of the soldiers, so he was obviously very important. Importantly, Duncan was also Paul's best friend. Duncan told Paul that he and a group of Leto's soldiers would head to Arrakis tomorrow. Paul wanted to join them, but Duncan refused in order to keep Paul safe. Eventually, Paul went to his father, Leto, and asked him if he could go to Arrakis with Duncan. Leto explained that the Emperor had given them the planet after taking it from the Harkonnens, and it was almost certain that the war would break out soon. So, Leto thought Duncan should go first to form an alliance with the Fremen tribes because without them, Leto's people would easily lose against the Harkonnen if they decided to wage war on them while they are on the planet Arrakis. So at that moment, Paul accepted his father's words because they were true. The whole world feared the Harkonnen unnaturally because they were so strong that it made them literally beasts, not men. And some say it's due to the excessive amount of resources they've taken from Arrakis over the years. And yes, those in front of you are the Harkonnen, the most important people for us. They are Vladimir Harkonnen, leader of all Harkonnen, and also Rabban, Vladimir's nephew and his right-hand man. Anyway, sir, a few weeks passed for Paul, and finally, he went with his mother, Lady Jessica, and his father Leto to the planet Arrakis. There, they were welcomed by an assistant ambassador right after Duncan. So, the idea was that the Harkonnen, the people of the planet we found there, were ecstatic, like it was not even natural celebrating Boslia and his entire family. Even though they did not want to celebrate anyone else, they certainly would not want someone not from them ruling over them. Anyway, later when Paul entered the palace where he would stay with his father and mother, he found there a sculpture of a sacred worm for the vermin called the State of Sands. A strange worm, 400 meters long, always appears in the desert and destroys anything in front of her. Anyway, Busto took a bit of rest. Suddenly, why is a pest controller named Hunter in front of him wanting to kill him? But thank God, he killed it quickly before it could do anything. At that moment, chaos ensued and the gods started searching everywhere for the person controlling this creature until they found him. It turned out that he was one of the Horaks, hiding in the royal palace undetected. At that moment, the ambassador started securing the place even more to ensure everyone's safety. Shortly after, Duncan came and sat down with Leto and everyone, and told him that he stayed with the Vermin group for 4 weeks and agreed with one of their leaders to form an alliance. That leader's name was Steel John. And Steelgod will be here soon. We'll talk with him. And indeed, before he could finish his sentence, was here. And the first thing he did when he saw Leto was spit on him. But it wasn't a big deal because it turned out to be something ceremonial. Don't ask me how. But the important thing is that Leto offered him an alliance, so Steelgod said he might agree but on one condition. When you ally with us, you have to leave the desert to all the Freeman people and stay within your walled kingdom. At that moment, Leto agreed, so Steelgod said he'd think about it and get back to him. Then he left. After a little while, King Leto began to see the planet's conditions he's living on. Of course, the main task that everyone who comes to this planet must do is to prospect for spices and then send all the spices to the other planets of the world. Now Leto respects the supervisor for all this. She suddenly got a PhD in technology. She's considered part of the Fremen, but also not one of them at the same time because she works with the colonizers searching for spices. So she isn't very well liked by her own people. Anyway, now all the Leto guys are wearing Freeman suits, which protect the wearer from the harsh climate of Arrakis. Plus, they let you drink your recycled sweat to avoid thirst in the deserts. After wine, they all took the airplane with the doctor, and they went to explore the excavation conditions and understand more about them and the desert. So in the desert, they saw the bustling spice excavation operation. It seems that the operation goes on all day through the desert to gather as much spice as possible. As soon as the sandworm approaches it, it swiftly grabs the dig machine and returns to the kingdom, and so on and so forth non-stop. But Leto and the doctor are in trouble now because the transporter supposed to bring the dig machine to the kingdom broke down at the last minute. Leto had to take his aircraft to save the workers inside the dig machine because the worm could consume them any moment. Eventually, he reaches them, and Paul with the guards gets the people out of the dig machine. But they bump into Paul's face with some spices, and he had taken off his mask, so he collapses on the ground and unable to move for an odd reason. But thankfully, Leto's assistant quickly helped, and they all got on the aircraft and escaped the place quickly, literally witnessing the worm devour the dig machine like a seed. After a while, when they returned to the kingdom, he went to tell his mother. He said when the spices hit his face, he had a strange vision immediately. He saw the girl who always appears in his dreams, and this time she killed him with a knife. And he also told her, I knew from my dreams that you are pregnant. The mother was obviously very surprised by this because she actually is pregnant. In the end, she accepted this because she is a witch and has heard such things before. A long time passes, and night eventually comes. Everyone was asleep. Then, suddenly, something startled the king. They shot an arrow at the man, paralyzing him instantly. This made them realize that he was the kingdom's healer. He did this because Roban and the Horakina clan threatened to kill him if he did not bring them Leto. But still, the doctor said that now Leto, I did all this for my wife, and for that, I put a venom into one of your teeth. If you go near Vladimir, the ruler of the Horakina clan, bite down on it, and it will spray poison into his face. The problem is that they had many giant spaceships and a powerful army, and immediately started destroying the kingdom completely. At that moment, the soldiers quickly went to their place to fight, but Horakanians destroyed them before they could get on. So, they had to fight with swords on the ground, but the soldiers weren't ready, and the battle was too big for them. The kingdom was occupied by Horakanians at that moment. And what is Duncan? He was awake, now in the Horakanians, one after another, looking for Polo and Lady Emma. But it does not matter because the Horakanians kidnapped them and now want to throw them into the desert and kill them with the sandy winds. But no worries, Duncan went out and fought bravely. Unite through the Harakini of balance, took one of their planes and quickly tried spreading out to catch up with Paul. But Paul's mom had taught him a magic item that now let him untie his mom, allowing her to finish her spell and kill them all. But the Harakini figured out what had happened now and disrupted the plane with Paul and his mom, causing it to crash. They left Paul and his mom and took a bag from the plane, then ran towards the kingdom to save it, only to see the Harakini destroying the entire kingdom and taking what was left for themselves. In that moment, Paul and Leta were distraught, discovering that he and all his soldiers were killed. After a while, everyone went back to the plane, opened the bag, and found it filled with things. Among them was Letha's ring of power. Everyone was shocked and unsure of what to do, believing that Letha was still being held by the Harakini. The poison they took still affected him, as they had stripped him of all his clothes and sat him before Vladimir, their leader, in utter humiliation. The idea here is that at that moment the doctor came in to take his wife. They killed her and then went after him too. When Vladimir got close to Leto to gloat, he sprayed poison on his face, and Vladimir and all his assistants died immediately. Unfortunately, Leto died with them. Duncan went to Dr. Let after a while to save Paul and his mother because she can survive in the desert much better than he can. And indeed, because of Leto, they were able to reach them. Duncan told them that Leto had died and that Paul was their new king. He promised to protect him with all his might. After that, they all left the place completely. At that moment, Duncan couldn't take Paul back to the kingdom because it was too dangerous. He didn't know what to do. Dr. Let told him about a safe place where she and some of the Fremen people could live. They headed there. After a while, they all reached the place where Leto had been living, which looked exactly like a temple, with some Fremen people living there with her. Paul asked her to let the Fremen help him. He promised that once he became king again, he would create a paradise and provide everything they needed. No one would take their planet from them again. Paul hadn't finished speaking when some other soldiers of the Emperor, that the ruler of all planets, came to kill him. This meant that even the Emperor couldn't stand against the Harkonnen anymore and decided to retaliate against them. At that moment, Duncan closed the door on Paul and the others to delay the soldiers so that Paul and his mother could escape. Paul didn't want to escape. He wanted to help his friend Duncan, but alas, Duncan had already closed the door and started fighting the soldiers left and right. Paulette was sadly struck multiple times with his sword and couldn't stand up again. Meanwhile, the people with Paulo escaped through a back door. Lita led Paulo and his mother to the vermin tribes to seek their help. She was happy to do something to delay the Emperor's soldiers, but unfortunately, while calling for help, another soldier struck her from behind and killed her. But she had already asked for help, and the sandworm emerged, now devouring everyone. If you ask me how the worm came, I tell you she just stomped on the ground, and the worm heard because of the vibrations and came to eat everyone. Meanwhile, Paulo and his group found a plane and kept walking toward their vermin tribe. They kept walking and walking, but then got caught in a severe sandstorm. They tried to fly through it, but the plane broke apart and crashed. The important thing is that everyone was safe. They usually put on their vermin suits again them and continued walking for the rest of the way. But of course, to be able to walk without the worm noticing them and coming to eat them, they had to walk in such a strange way, like wind blowing the sand really slow so the worm wouldn't notice. They kept walking that way all night until they reached the sand. It was not smooth, and every move made a loud noise which attracted the sandworm. So everyone ran from it, but naturally, it was bigger and faster, so it caught up with them. The worm heard it and the sound of a spice drill nearby, so it bolted towards it immediately. Do you know what that means? It means that Vladimir is not dead, and he and his sand scavengers are currently drilling for spices. But if in the kingdom, Vladimir was saved at the last moment. They soaked him in a spice liquid to regain his strength, and it worked. After calling them worms, they finally reached Steelguard. And there, they asked me to return them to their home planet Kaldan. There, I helped them and do everything they want. But still, Dad wanted to kill them right now because firstly, they have nothing valuable to offer in return, and secondly, there is no possible alliance between them. He could kill them. But of course, the Steelguard is going to kill Paul, who is currently considered a king and also a sorcerer. On top of all that, his mother is also a sorcerer. So, there's no way he could defeat them, and at that moment, he recognized their strength and decided to help them to earn their respect. But before they left, he finally saw Paul, the girl he always saw in his dreams, whose name, by the way, is Shani. Overall, Steelguard will take them and go to their village. They were at ease until someone named Yomis, who also always saw Paul in his dreams, interfered. Yomis told Steelguard that since Lady Umbol is your crisis, then you are no longer our leader. He demanded to become the leader and challenged Lady The winner would become the leader. But this girl is magical. She can't fight, and this is according to what they've known. So Paul will be the one to fight Kume, and she gave him a special sword before the battle, a sword made from sandworm. She told him that it's very strong and will help him. For your knowledge, Shani knows nothing about Paul or his dreams at all. She doesn't know anything about him, but did it out of the goodness of her heart and nothing more. Overall, when Paul started using the skills, in each round where Paul hit her, he could have killed her, but he restrained himself because he never killed anyone before like this. But in the end, he realized there was no other way but to kill her, so he had to do it. At that moment, Stiga told him, "You are one of us now, and you can return with us to our village." But Paul's mother said, "No, we must return to our planet." But Paul responded, "No, I'm not a stranger anymore. My father, Liet, immersed his blood here because the first thing he wanted to do was form an alliance. So I must make this alliance and completely end Vladimir." He had no choice but to agree. Indeed, Steelguard took them and went to their village. As soon as they got close, they started seeing the strength of the Ferugians, like seeing one of them literally jumping. Dude, it was amazing. Said, "Okay, but can Paul kill Vladimir? Can he bring him and his mother back to their planet? Or will they form an alliance and start a giant war?" We'll find out in the next part. If you've reached so far in our video, you're officially awesome. Thanks for sticking around with Chat Craze. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to leave a nice comment. Until next time.